to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during a press conference in the ASEAN Summit, expressed concerns regarding the increasing assertiveness of the People's Republic of China in the South and East China Seas, as well as in the Taiwan Strait. Developments in international diplomacy. South Korea is seeking to bolster its partnership with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations with the aim of elevating their ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership next year. Another top story tonight takes us still in South Korea, where rescuers are working tirelessly to reach passengers trapped in a flooded tunnel in the central city of Cheongju. Tragically, 13 bodies have been recovered thus far. India and Indonesia have just announced the launch of a new trade channel aimed at strengthening their cooperation and addressing global challenges. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during a press conference in the ASEAN Summit, expressed concerns regarding the increasing assertiveness of the People's Republic of China in the South and East China Seas, as well as in the Taiwan Strait. He underscored the critical role of the South China Sea as a vital thoroughway for global commerce and connectivity.
We're concerned by the PRC's increasing assertiveness in the South and East China Seas and in the Taiwan Strait. We remain committed to upholding freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea, a critical throughway for global commerce and connectivity, and we support ASEAN's negotiation of a code of conduct consistent with international law. The United States also seeks to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, which is in the interest of all nations. 50% of global commerce goes through that strait every single day. Some 70% of the semiconductors made for the world are made in Taiwan. We continue to oppose unilateral changes to the status quo by either side.
The Secretary of State further emphasized the significance of maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, highlighting its vital importance to global trade, with 50% of global commerce passing through the strait daily, as well as 70% of the world's semiconductors being produced in Taiwan.
As we work to extend the initiative, we also stand ready to support a just and lasting peace to the conflict based on the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Principles that are at the heart of the United Nations Charter and ASEAN's Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, and that reflect the desire of people and nations in every part of the world to be able to choose their own path, free from the use of force, coercion, or aggression. The U.S. and ASEAN will continue to champion these principles together as we tackle shared challenges and realize the promise of this extraordinarily dynamic region.
Yesterday, following up on my trip to China a few weeks ago, Director Wong and I had a candid and constructive conversation on a range of bilateral, regional, and global issues. These included Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and cross-strait relations. Despite very clear areas of disagreement, the United States is also prepared to work with Beijing on challenges that affect people in the United States, the PRC, and around the world.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also expressed his dissatisfaction with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's interventions during a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Secretary Blinken, who did not have a direct meeting with Lavrov during the event, addressed reporters at a news conference characterizing the Russian diplomat's remarks as unconstructive and unproductive on all fronts.
Oh, look, I don't think it's appropriate for me to speak for the members of ASEAN. I'll let them speak for themselves. I think it's fair to say that based on what we heard from Foreign Minister Lavrov today, his interventions and engagements were not constructive or productive on any issue.
During the news conference, Secretary Blinken highlighted that Lavrov's interventions were devoid of any positive contributions and instead focused on assigning blame to the U.S.
He focused, unlike
the United States, and unlike many other countries, on a totally negative presentation and agenda in which he effectively ascribed every problem in the world to the United States. We were resolutely focused on the affirmative agenda that we have with ASEAN, including many of the issues that I've already had an opportunity to discuss. But I'll leave it to you to see how others heard that. But I think there was a very stark difference in the focus that we brought to this affirmative agenda and this shared vision for the future of the region, and what we heard from Foreign Minister Lavrov.
Describing Lavrov's approach as totally negative, Blinken voiced his disappointment with the Russian foreign minister's stance.
The countries of Southeast Asia, including, by the way, in the statement that the foreign ministers released yesterday, the ASEAN statement, but also independently or through the United Nations, other international organizations, have made very clear that they're committed to the basic principles that underlie the United Nations Charter and the ASEAN Treaty of Amity that are being aggressed by Russia in Ukraine, along with the Ukrainian people. Territorial integrity, sovereignty, independence. I think virtually every country in the region has spoken clearly to that in one way or another, again, either through statements yesterday at the United Nations or independently. There is no doubt in my mind that the overwhelming majority of global opinion, including in Southeast Asia, stands strongly for these principles that are being violated every single day by Russia and its aggression.
More developments in international diplomacy. South Korea is seeking to bolster its partnership with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations with the aim of elevating their lives or their ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership next year. South Korea's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Park Jin, made this announcement during a meeting with ASEAN foreign ministers in Jakarta earlier. Now, Foreign Minister Park Jin expressed Seoul's commitment to deepen and expand partnership with ASEAN through the implementation of the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, known as KASI. This diplomatic initiative, specifically designed for the ASEAN region, aims to enhance strategic communication and foster cooperation to promote regional peace and stability.
A year ago, I emphasized that my government was committed to playing a more proactive role for a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. I also made clear that ASEAN would continue to remain prominent in ROK's foreign policy. A year after, I'm pleased to see that we have made much headway. Most notably, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, or KASI, has been launched as our policy specifically tailored to ASEAN. The ROK announced its full text 3 months ago. As the name suggests, KASI focuses on solidarity, reciprocity, and equal partnership. I was told during a recent meeting with ASEAN ambassadors in Seoul that KASI has special meanings in this region. Love in Indonesia, giving in Malaysia, and commonality, in the words of Kasih Manwa, in the Philippines. Coincidentally, I must say that KASI encompasses all of these meanings.
KASI's comprehensive text, which was finalized 3 months ago, plays a pivotal role in the South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy. Introduced in November of last year, the strategy underscores South Korea's commitment to the region and outlines its vision for enhanced engagement and collaboration in various sectors.
Here, let me briefly share with you the 4 key aspects of KASI. First, KASI is anchored in our firm and unwavering support for ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Second, KASI places greater emphasis on strategic cooperation with ASEAN on political security areas. Third, CASI will expand cooperation in future areas, including, but not limited to, digital, smart infrastructure, and climate action. Fourth, CASI is an action-oriented, and the ROK will substantially increase its cooperation resources.
South Korea's efforts to strengthen its partnership with ASEAN comes as part of its broader objectives to deepen regional integration and expand cooperation in economic, political, and security spheres.
ROK's contribution to the three ASEAN-related cooperation funds will be doubled to an annual sum of $48 million by 2027. As such, CASI will carry on and upgrade past achievements of all the previous ROK governments and deepen and expand our partnership with ASEAN. Part of these efforts will culminate in establishing the ASEAN-ROK Comprehensive Strategic Partnership next year at the 35th anniversary of dialogue relations. A meaningful, substantive, and mutually beneficial CSP will mark yet another milestone in ASEAN-ROK relations. Certainly, it will take our partnership to new heights. Excellencies and colleagues, your welcome and support for CASI at this meeting and at the upcoming ASEAN-ROK Summit in September will help it gain traction in our region.
Also, at the ASEAN Summit, Australia unveiled its plans to provide a substantial 775 million Australian dollars in development assistance to Southeast Asia, including Timor-Leste, as part of its efforts to strengthen ties with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. During a ministerial-level meeting with her ASEAN counterparts, Australian Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong made the significant announcement. Let's listen in.
Deepening Australia's engagement with Southeast Asia is a priority for our government because ASEAN's security is Australia's security and ASEAN's success is our success. We will continue to strongly support ASEAN's vital role in the peace and stability of our region. ASEAN's contribution through preventative diplomacy is essential to our shared goals. We all want a region that safeguards our capacity to disagree, preserves states' agency and protects our ability to decide our own destiny free from pressure. As comprehensive strategic partners, Australia and ASEAN have an ambitious program of cooperation to build a region resilient to many complex challenges, including climate change, health security and transnational crime. Our signature Australia for ASEAN initiatives supports your priorities, including practical implementation of the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, with its aim to promote an enabling environment for peace, stability and prosperity in the region. The government has invested in an additional $470 million over the 4 years in development assistance for Southeast Asia, and in this year will contribute $775 million to Southeast Asia and to Timor-Leste.
Australia aims to deepen its engagement with Southeast Asia and increase its official development assistance to 1.24 billion Australian dollars by the year 2023 to next year. According to Australian government data, an estimated 326.1 million Australian dollars has been allocated as official development assistance to Indonesia for the same period. Now, this generous development assistance package demonstrates Australia's dedication to fostering strong relationships with ASEAN nations and supporting their development authorities.
But more important than development assistance is trade. And two-way trade between ASEAN and Australia was $127 billion in 2021-22. But we believe there is much more opportunity to be captured and to grow between us. To that end, we will soon release the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040.
And we have more breaking news coming in from the ASEAN region or the Asian region. India and Indonesia have just announced the launch of a new trade channel aimed at strengthening their cooperation and addressing global challenges. Now, this initiative, known as the India-Indonesia Economic and Financial Dialogue, marks a significant milestone in the bilateral relations between the two nations. The dialogue, which was formally established on Sunday, will focus on key areas of cooperation, including bilateral investment, financial services, and infrastructure development.
Indonesia has emerged as India's largest trading partner in the ASEAN region. Our trade has increased eightfold since 2005, and it has touched $38 billion in the last year. In this background, therefore, we view this dialogue as an enabler for further deepening our partnership. We will be discussing issues on common interest that are mutually beneficial in enhancing our relationship with Indonesia. The areas of cooperation will include bilateral investment, financial services, and infrastructure development, among others. This dialogue, which we are announcing today, can play an instrumental role in reaching a common understanding on issues and taking forward the global agenda from the perspective of the emerging market developing economies. I believe that this dialogue will facilitate better cooperation between India and Southeast Asia, while contributing to the global economic and financial stability.
These two influential nations have a strong presence in international forums such as the G20, World Trade Organization, and the East Asia Summit. Their joint participation in these platforms has enabled them to voice their concerns and contribute to shaping global policies. Mulyani Indrawati, the Finance Minister of Indonesia, also welcomed India's support for Indonesia's membership on the Financial Action Task Force during its G20 presidency last year and the ASEAN chairmanship. Indrawati expressed her commitment to strengthening the bilateral relationship of trade and investment.
I'm also glad that Minister Nirmala providing also strong support on the Indonesia own agenda, whether this is related to the membership of Indonesia on the Financial Action Task Force and during Indonesia presidency of the G20 and the current Indonesia ASEAN chairmanship. So we will continue strengthen this bilateral relationship.
The latest developments from the G20 Finance Ministers Summit in India. In a significant statement made today, U.S. Secretary of State or U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Secretary Janet Yellen, emphasized the importance of redoubling support for war-stricken Ukraine as the single best way to boost the global economy. Secretary Yellen also underscored the need to bolster emerging economies and address the debt distress.
Another key priority this week is to redouble our support for Ukraine as it continues to defend itself against Russia's illegal and unprovoked attack. My visit to Kyiv earlier this year still deeply moves me to this day. Seeing the bravery and the resilience of the Ukrainian people up close impacted me personally. During the trip, I also saw the massive difference that foreign assistance is making to the lives of Ukrainian civilians and the Ukrainian military's front lines. As I've said, ending this war is first and foremost a moral imperative, but it's also the single best thing we can do for the global economy.
The invasion of Ukraine by Russia, two major global bread baskets accounting for nearly a quarter of the world's wheat supply, sent shockwaves through economies worldwide, leading to soaring prices for food and fuel. It's also important to note that discussions surrounding Ukraine present a delicate situation for India, the host of the G20 summit. While India has not explicitly condemned Russia's invasion, it's also a member of the Quad grouping, along with Australia, the US, and Japan.
Let me be clear, our coalition's support for Ukraine is unequivocal. The United States will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, and I know the allies and partners in our coalition will do so as well. Budgetary support is critical to Ukraine's resistance. By helping keep the economy and the government running, we're giving Ukraine the support it needs so it can fight for freedom and its sovereignty. We will also continue to cut off Russia's access to military equipment and technologies that it needs to wage war against Ukraine. One of our core goals this year is to combat Russia's efforts to evade our sanctions.
Secretary Yellen further highlighted ongoing efforts to tackle debt distress faced by struggling economies, prioritizing bank reform and reach a global tax deal.
Over the past few years, we have seen debt vulnerabilities mount for many countries as a result of the pandemic and Russia's illegal war against Ukraine. Today, over half of all low-income countries are near or in debt distress. This is double the share of countries that were in this situation in 2015.
She also cautioned against premature discussions about lifting tariffs on China, emphasizing the need for careful consideration in this matter.
And it would be useful to look for ways to de-escalate over time. At the moment, with respect to the tariffs, this is something that I discussed with my Chinese counterparts. As you mentioned, we are completing a 4-year review, but I would say that the tariffs were put in place because we had concern with unfair trade practices on China's side. Concerns with those practices remain. They really have not been addressed, and China put in place retaliatory tariffs of its own. So perhaps over time this is an area where we could make progress, but I would say it's premature to use this as an area for de-escalation, at least at this time. So one of the key messages that I conveyed to China is that in addition to honestly and candidly expressing and discussing the concerns that each of us have about our bilateral involvement relationship, that we have a common obligation to address the needs of the global economy. And indeed,
in other news tonight, Japan is grappling with scorching temperatures as heat stroke alerts are issued for Tokyo and nearby regions. The mercury continues to hover near previous records, prompting authorities to advise residents to stay indoors and avoid strenuous physical activity. The extreme heat has caught the attention of tourists visiting the country. Take a look.
Well, yeah, I feel like every time, we're visiting somewhere and there seems to be like a heat wave or like a rare weather disaster, it's kind of becoming the new like normal, and I'm very concerned about that. And I think it's a big shame because this is a really beautiful city. We want to be out as much as possible, but with it being as hot as it is, I feel like we have to be really mindful of that and staying inside as much as we can. But definitely climate change is a big concern.
Yeah, just walking around is exhausting because we're sweating without doing anything. And I feel like people here tolerate the heat way better than we as Europeans do, because we're used to maybe lower temperatures in summer.
As temperatures continue to rise, it is becoming increasingly crucial for individuals to take precautions and prioritize their well-being. Authorities are urging everyone to stay hydrated, seek shade, and limit outdoor activities during peak hours. Our next story brings us to the U.S., where record-breaking temperatures are expected to scorch parts of the country Sunday U.S. time. Authorities are issuing warnings of dangerous heat levels that will persist into this week, particularly across the southwest region. Currently, nearly a third of Americans, approximately 113 million people, are under heat advisories spanning from Florida to California and reaching up to Washington state. The National Weather Service is urging the public not to underestimate the severity of the heat and the potential risks to life. On Saturday, the sweltering city of Phoenix, Arizona, experienced a scorching 118 degrees Fahrenheit or 48 degrees Celsius. Astonishingly, this marks the 16th consecutive day with temperatures reaching 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, coming close to breaking the previous record. Reports from mobile clinics in Phoenix indicate that they are treating homeless individuals suffering from their third-degree burns as a result of the blistering heat. Furthermore, Death Valley in California, known as one of the hottest places on Earth, is forecasted to reach a staggering 129 degrees Fahrenheit or 54 degrees Celsius, approaching the highest temperatures ever reliably recorded on our planet. The National Weather Service has also stated that local temperature records could be broken Sunday U.S. time in several regions, including San Joaquin Valley, Mojave Desert, and the Great Basin. Another top story tonight takes us to South Korea, where rescuers are worrying tirelessly to reach passengers trapped in a flooded tunnel in the central city of Cheongju. Tragically, 13 bodies have been recovered thus far. On Saturday night, a burst riverbank unleashed a torrent of floodwater into the underpass, leaving individuals in their cars and commuters on a bus stranded and trapped. Authorities have not yet released the exact number of people who were trapped within the 2,247-foot tunnel, but they have confirmed the presence of 15 vehicles. This devastating incident comes amidst a week of relentless torrential rains, which have caused widespread flooding, landslides, and power outages. The death toll from the past week's severe weather has reached at least 39. As of Monday morning, 9 people are still remaining missing following the weekend deluge, as reported by authorities. In the suburb of Asong, where the flooded tunnel is located, several bodies were recovered from inside a bus. Unfortunately, 9 survivors were rescued on Saturday, and according to several local media outlets, the River Flood Control Office had issued a warning about the alarming water levels just a few hours before the tragedy occurred. Reports suggest that traffic around the tunnel area should have been diverted in light of this warning. The Korean Meteorological Administration has issued a concerning forecast predicting more rainfall until Wednesday this week, and authorities are warning that these ongoing weather conditions pose a grave danger to affected areas.
앞으로 이런 기상 이변은 늘 일상화되는 것이기 때문에 이러한 기후 변화 이 상황을 이제 우리가 늘상 있는 것으로 알고 대처를 해야지, 이거를 이상 현상이니까 어쩔 수 없다는 식의 인식은 완전히 뜯어 고쳐야 됩니다.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.